Elon Musk's price cutting strategy. He's in a price war with China right now in this snapshot of time. He's talking all about cutting costs repeatedly so that he can get more of a high volume business and make money off volume instead of having his profit margins come predominantly because of a higher markup or higher margin. Is that a smart move for him? But more importantly, is that a smart move for you as a solopreneur, as a entrepreneur who wants to become an entrepreneur, as a small mom and pop shop owner, and or you're a small business with a small but mighty team? No matter what, if you're not big like Elon Musk, you're not in the same industry that he is, which in the case of Tesla is electric cars. If you have nothing to do with that industry, can you still have a takeaway in terms of your pricing, marketing, and sales strategy with our discussion about Elon Musk today and his pricing wars, especially versus China today? Well, you're about to find out. You're working a job, or maybe two, because you've got to pay the bills. But on the side, you've got a business as an entrepreneur, as a creator. You want to take your side hustle to start up levels of success. You're in the right place. And today we're talking about marketing, selling, and keeping in mind a pricing strategy and whether Elon Musk's pricing strategy is one that you should follow or not. My name is Stacey Storino. Welcome to the Side Hustle to Startup podcast. I've been an attorney since 1998, an entrepreneur for 25 years, and a business coach specializing in content marketing for conversions, organic content marketing for conversions, for the last 10 of those 25 years. My goal is to help you go from tiny to mighty with your own business so that you can leave that long day job aside that you don't want to work anymore, or leave behind doing a gaggle of gig jobs just so that you can focus on your own business full time, if that's what you really want to do, of course. If you've got 45 seconds and you want a free and useful guide, a tip guide to help you make sure that your entrepreneurial journey is kicked off right, and or that you have a firm foundation for your brand online, then you're going to want to pick up my tip guide at don'tbeafakeguru.com. It's all one word, that website, don'tbeafakeguru.com. And with it, you'll know that your brand presence is going to be a successful one, whether you're looking to be a guru per se or not. If you've got a brand, you're a brand leader, which means in the eyes of your ideal customers, you're a thought leader in your space. You're a bit of a guru, my friend. So embrace it and do it right. Get my guide, which is free, to make sure that you're doing it right. Okay, anyway, I created the Side Hustle to Startup podcast to give you simple, easy, actionable steps per podcast so that you can go from your crazy busy life, where your business is nothing but a side hustle right now, to helping you grow that business in a realistic way to startup levels of success. Okay, so each podcast, like this one, covers a quick point about something that's going on in the world today and how it relates to you specifically as an entrepreneur and why that point matters and what to do about it. And we'll also cover a tip to help you in terms of your entrepreneurial financial offense, probably in light of what we're covering in that particular podcast, and a tip to get you to double down on entrepreneurial financial defense. Again, all the points do tend to be related so that this way, every single day, ideally, you can move closer to your goal of a startup level type of success. You're in the right place. So let's get started. Okay, so today we are covering Elon Musk's pricing strategy, his pricing war with, primarily, from the way things look, China. Okay, so and Hong Kong is noting that shares in Elon Musk's Tesla's Chinese rivals, not Elon Musk's company or companies, but his Chinese rivals, fell today while this podcast is live, after CEO Elon Musk said that the company it has cut prices before, it's going to continue to cut prices in order to boost more demand for electric cars in what is now an increasingly competitive market. So he's saying that this is a direct quote. He says, "We've taken a view that pushing for higher volumes and a larger fleet is the right choice here versus a lower volume and higher margin," right? He said that in an earnings call with analysts yesterday while this podcast is live on Wednesday. He also said, quote, "We do believe that it's better to ship a large number of cars at a lower margin and subsequently harvest that margin in the future as we perfect autonomy." So, Elon's pricing strategies in the past, let alone what he's going to do and apparently continue to do now, it's definitely causing a major impact in the particular field that he's in with Tesla in this case. His price cuts have caused other folks in his field to have to cut prices too, not just in China. But his cuts, Tesla's cuts, Elon Musk's cuts have sparked a price war now. And so Huawei, I don't want to say it wrong, Huawei, which is an EV or electrical vehicle company over in China, they've said Tesla has cut prices a lot. If we don't cut our prices, we really can't survive. So here's the thing. If you're a business, whatever it might be, no matter what you're selling and no matter who you're selling it to, if it doesn't really stand in this particular space, you might be wondering, do I care what Elon Musk is doing with Tesla in terms of pricing? I don't sell cars. I don't sell anything having to do with cars. I'm not in the EV market or anything like that. I'm going to tell you that it does. In terms of you maybe at least taking a fresh look with a fresh pair of eyes at your pricing strategy. I am not, for whatever products, services, or offerings that you sell, I am not advocating that you automatically slash your prices. In many cases, depending upon what you're selling and who you're selling it to, that doesn't make any sense. But depending upon your industry and your facts and circumstances, it might. But here's the danger. So I'm not saying what Elon Musk is doing in his industry is right, wrong, or, good, bad, or ugly. What I'm saying for you is just because you're worried about like maybe the American economy and or the global economy right now for whatever the reasons, just going and slashing prices so that you get more volume, so you think you're going to be making more sales. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. I'm of two minds about this. I'll tell you what both are in just a second. A lot of times it's raise your prices a bit higher because, especially if you're new or relatively new to being an entrepreneur, and or you've been an entrepreneur for a while, but admittedly you're not good at like the financial things, you may not be making enough of a profit margin for your business to even make sense to you. So I know the costs of a lot of things, depending upon what you're doing. And, like if you're a product-based business or not, I know the cost of a lot of things in terms of materials, ingredients, component parts, or even if you're digital only, the cost of hosting, the cost of having an email list, whatever, everything's gone up, especially over the last 2 years or so. You're in good company, of course. And of course, your prices have had to go up. You would be surprised how many people, because I've been a business coach for years, even folks that are coming to me relatively new recently who haven't raised their prices at all because they're afraid they won't get any sales. But meanwhile, their profit margins have automatically shrunk because it's more expensive for them to do business. It's more expensive for them to make or produce or host the things that they are, selling. And it's like they think like they have no choice. They're being forced to swallow a poison pill. You're not. I'll explain why in a minute. So when it comes to looking at your pricing strategy, Dan Kennedy once warned, because he's like one of the fathers, one of the bigwigs of marketing and sales from back in the day. He's still pretty relevant in the marketing and sales circles now. He said that, the problem with trying to be the cheapest deal in town is the only person who wins that battle is the one that can price the cheapest and still have a profit margin. You don't want to get involved when it comes to pricing your offerings, usually in being the cheapest deal in town, because you have to have an incredible amount of volume to do that. The only person who wins the pricing game is the entity or business that is the cheapest, that can drive sufficient volume so that, just like Elon's betting, the volume will help him make up the profit margin uh, from otherwise cutting his overhead and his margin rather. So the thing is, most people can't win the game of being the cheapest deal in town. They just can't do it because they're not driving sufficient volume like Elon can afford to do with marketing and sales and the amount of money that he can invest and or reinvest back into Tesla to really bench press out Tesla's great, be top of mind with anybody who would be his ideal customer, paid and or otherwise organic strategies to get their attention, keep their attention, communicate the price drop enough that they can generate enough volume and sales. It's very tricky to be the one that wins the race basically to the bottom when it comes to pricing. And so your marketing and sales strategy has to be a lot more voluminous, a lot more high powered, and a lot of folks can afford, if we're looking at solopreneurs and small businesses and mom and pop shops, you can't likely do what Elon can do in the gambit he's been taking and that he's clearly doubling down on. I mean, everybody's facts and circumstances are different. I'll throw out that disclaimer. Everyone's field is different. But the problem is, most fields do not allow for you to just slash and slash and slash prices and without driving super mega nova volume, being able to make enough money in profit at the end of the month to afford to live to fight another day the next month. Most solopreneurs, mom and pop shops, small businesses just can't do it. So you don't want to be the second cheapest, because if people are just shopping on price, you just lost. So if you can't drive a ton of volume through paid strategies, organic or both, you're really cutting your nose off to spite your face. So number one, granted this is broad brushstroke, I'm saying you can't afford to do what Elon's doing. Elon can afford to do what he's doing, I'm going to guess, but you probably can't. In fact, I'm asking you to take a look at the price of your business overhead. Even if all you do is sell digital downloads and it's final sale only, you have to look at the cost of all the software, any sort of staff, independent contractors, entrepreneurs, you really, employees rather, you really have to look at your fixed costs, your non-fixed costs. You really have to look at what you are putting out every month just to sell digital download stuff, or just to sell, if you're a coach or a course creator, a course that might be digital only, or one-on group coachings, or even one-on-one coachings. You have to look at what it costs you to keep your email list, to keep your website, hosting, security. There's so many costs that people kind of get blind to because maybe you just pay it annually, or it's just monthly expenses and you don't love the money stuff. So like, I make enough to cover it, Stacey. But the thing is, if you slash and slash and slash your prices to kind of follow what Elon's doing, you might end up getting to a point where you're lucky if you break even, and or you're running in the red sooner or later. So for most people, being the cheapest deal in town does not work. It doesn't work for long. It doesn't work at all. So if anything, I ask you to look at all of your current costs and pricing with inflation and whatnot, and just figuring and factoring, are you truly profitable at all? If you don't have a lot of experience or you're quote unquote not good at the money stuff, you need to know if you're even profitable in the first place, cutting prices or not. And for every person who listens to this and goes, that's silly, there are people going, yeah, I know, I know. Or, there's always extra when I finally look at my, bank accounts, but like, you're asking me to really get tough with a business budget. Well, you should, because sooner or later, that's a recipe for disaster if you don't. But you also have to understand what your profit margin even is. I could give out a blanket piece of advice, like make sure that like a third is your overhead and expenses, a third is like taxes, and a third is profit for you. That can work a lot of the times. A lot of the times that's not quite accurate enough. Again, it depends upon your business model and what industry you're working in. But if you're not real clear, let's just say, for example, that that out of everything that you sell, you're making a third profit above the board just for you to take home, after legal compliance and taxes come out of that. Are you really confident that you're profitable enough where you are right now, cutting prices or not cutting prices? If anything, you have to raise your prices, not just for everything I just said, wholesale costs, overhead expenses are going up. If you have payroll, minimum wage might have gone up. If you're a food service establishment listening to this, depending on the state, territory, and holding you're in, minimum wage might have gone up 50 cents, a dollar. Like that's eating into your profit margins. You may have to raise your prices just to make sure you're protecting your profit margins so you can afford to stay in business. These are very, not fun decisions. This is kind of a bunch of entrepreneurial adulting we have to do. So being the cheapest deal in town is not something I recommend unless you are confident through organic and paid strategies, both, that you can get enough attention, keep enough attention, stay top of mind, and drive a sufficient amount of volume to and through your marketing and sales funnel. Might not make any sense to be the cheapest deal in town. Actually, I'd encourage many of you to consider going the other way, not necessarily being the most expensive deal in town, but to make sure that you are priced competitively within your market. But when I say competitively within your market, what are the top 5 to 10 like success story brands in your sphere of influence who are, in your space that you're trying to be a thought leader, a business success in that space? What are they charging, and what can you do to make sure that you're charging the same price for whatever you're selling? How do you know that what if you make sure that you are charging within the top, say, 5%? You don't want to be the cheapest deal in town. You don't have to be the most expensive, but you want to be priced towards the top of your market, not towards the bottom. Yes, you might have fewer sales, but you can make a sufficient amount of profit with the margin, because you're actually the opposite, more than likely, of who Elon Musk is and his facts and circumstances, personally, professionally, financially, having to do with Tesla. Elon can drive a lot of traffic free and paid strategies. You might not even be able to afford ads. Or even if you can, you have a strict budget with those ads. And ads are getting ever more expensive, and the reach is ever harder to get because a lot of people can opt out of tracking. With iOS 14 back in 2021 and beyond, folks are opting out of getting tracked for ads. They're also thinking mistakenly they just won't get ads, which is silly. They will, and now it's worse for them because they're just being shown whatever washes ashore. They'd probably rather get tracked for things that they're interested in. But mostly people just think, I'm opting out of ads. And they're not. They're opting out of being tracked with a pixel, perhaps for the ads. Silly. But if you have little to no money for paid strategies, everything has to be organic, and you have a busy personal and or professional life. So you're lucky if you can put up a social post a day on the top 2 social media platforms that are best for your ideal customer. It may not even be what you like, but you have to focus on the top 2 social media platforms at a minimum that's most important to your niche. If you're having a hard time even putting up a daily piece of content, How are you going to drive enough traffic to be able to make it up on volume by slashing your prices and going all the way down to the bottom of the barrel? You're not Elon Musk. You need to make it from the margin and not from the volume in terms of your profit. And this is a conversation that a lot of new and relatively new entrepreneurs need to hear. Or even if you're an experienced entrepreneur, but you've just kind of been getting by and kind of just the financial part stinks, but you love selling your art or you love just being a coach or whatever. That's great. But if you've just kind of been getting by, you need to understand your numbers. It's not just a matter of budgeting, but understanding profit margins so that you're getting paid a sufficient amount of money to do what it is that you do for a living, right? Or that you want to do for a living full time if we are going from side hustle to startup. So, no, I probably don't think, if I have to paint with a broad brushstroke, that you should follow what Elon Musk is doing. Not because it's wrong for his industry and or in general. I think for his facts and circumstances, he can afford to win the race to the bottom with being the cheapest deal in town and still offering a lot of quality for the price one pays. So Elon is doing what he needs to do. He's decided volume and not margin. But most people listening to this are probably going to be in the opposite position. They really have to make sure they have sufficient margin, which means you're probably going to have to raise your prices. And you're not going to do sufficient volume, at least for where you are right now, especially if you can't afford to invest into paid strategies, especially if everything's going to be off the sweat of your brow and or your employees' brows, and it's going to be organic in whole or in part. So look to where the big success stories are in your industry and price your course, your digital downloads, your physical products, what have you, whatever you're selling it, who you're selling it to, you need to be amongst the top 5% in terms of your pricing. Here's one more reason why you want to do it. Because unless you're the cheapest deal in town, the other problem that you have is, I'm telling my students all the time, like, you want to concentrate on selling to people who are like in a tax bracket of upper middle class and above. Though, why? This isn't a value judgment on anybody. It's just those are the folks who are going to, in good times and in bad financially, they're more likely to have disposable income than low income folks, than middle class living paycheck to paycheck. And now with interest rates going up and, inflation being what it is, and I don't really think it's calmed down, which is why the Fed's still raising rates until everything breaks, which is going to be ugly when they do. But here's the thing. I'm not saying be afraid to go into business. I'm saying the only folks that you should be trying to sell your stuff to market and sell, whether it's free strategies, paid strategies, or both, should always be the upper middle class and above. Even during the Great Depression in the United States, which lasted around a decade, 40% of Americans, and that was like the worst of the worst times, were not at or under the poverty line. They had disposable income. And there was still a top percentile that wasn't 1, 2, 3% that had plenty of disposable income because they were rich, and another chunk after that had disposable income because they were upper middle class and above. Businesses still made money if they understood how to market and sell. And they didn't all have to slice their prices into the ground to survive and even thrive during the 10-year period that was the Great Depression. Depending upon who you're talking to right now, we're either not in a recession or not much of one. And the projections aren't that we're going to go into like a great recession anytime soon. But even so, don't go for the head fake. Most of the people who can afford to buy your courses, your digital downloads, your artwork, your t-shirts, your anything, your weight loss solutions, whatever it is that you're selling, most of those people were going to be upper middle class and above anyway, or middle class, definitely not living paycheck to paycheck. No matter what your ideal customer looks like otherwise, you never want to sell to people who are barely getting by. Even if that's you or you feel like that's you, you're not selling to yourself. You're selling to someone who has money. So is Elon, quite frankly, but he can afford to play the volume game. My point to you is you probably can't right now. And to be honest, I think in most cases, you wouldn't want it. So when it comes to financial offense, that entrepreneurial financial offense tip for the day, I'm telling you that in all likelihood, you need to raise your prices, either because it was due or overdue and you just got cold feet because you were afraid you were going to cheese people off and get them upset, or, now you realize that even if your profit margin doesn't stink, you probably want to price higher because you can make it on margin better without a ton of volume. And in fact, as a quick side note, the better the tax bracket, the more disposable income somebody has, statistically speaking, the less miserable of a customer they are. They refund less, they complain less, they're kind of with the program, they don't need as much hand holding for whatever the reason. Is it that they're better educated, better compensated? Is it they're not totally stressed out to the moon so they can think more clearly? I don't know, but they make much better um, customers. I found that. I used to have a $9.95 teaser course, and I was like, no way. Sure, I got better volume with it, but the amount of people who rolled in that were a mess, whew, a whole lot more work to support somebody at a $9.95 than anybody that's in my Funnel Dynasty course, which is my premium offering. Whether they're on a payment plan or they pay all at once, those folks are with it. They work hard. They're clear headed. They're not negative. They're not stressing over what they paid. They know it's an investment into their businesses. I'm just saying, just from my own experiences over a decade of being a coach, it's always better and you always get a higher quality customer. Well, most of the time you do. When you are pricing higher to attract somebody who is in a better place and is more likely to be happy to make the investment into whatever it is you're selling. And they're just better. They're better. They're more grounded. They can afford it. To be honest with you, in good financial times or bad, the vast majority of people buying your offerings are going to be upper middle class and above, right? So don't be afraid to raise your prices, especially if you need to. And then even if you don't need to, if it's just a good idea, so you don't seem like cheap in terms of quality. Because here's one more thing. Folks with money aren't looking for cheap, cheap, cheap. Most of them want to pay for quality so that they get quality. So you don't want that kind of stigma attached. This thing is so cheap. What's wrong with it? You don't want that. So people who are not coming from the financial shallows might actually not buy your stuff if it's too cheap because they're afraid it's not going to be very, very good. So that's a financial offense. Look at your prices, raise your prices. In terms of financial defense, I'm kind of weave it into the same point I just made. You need to have a budget for your business. You need to understand what your fixed costs are and your non-fixed or floating costs are. You need to understand where your money's going and do you have enough of a profit margin that you have an actual business, even if it's new and growing, versus just an expensive hobby, right? So I do want you to think about those two things in light of what we discussed today. Okay, so make sure you pick up your free guide of mine at don'tbeafakeguru.com, all one word. And yep, we're at the end of the podcast, but I'm curious. All this talk has me curious to see what you think about what we covered today. For real, I want you to comment down below if you're watching the video podcast version of this episode. If not, please navigate over to the Stacey Storino channel on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell notification and select all, because you can not only get your questions and comments to me on my videos. If it's the first time we're meeting, that's the best place to get me, is on YouTube. Plus, I have plenty of long form YouTube video trainings that might benefit you if you're new or relatively new in business, especially when it comes to content marketing for conversions. And of course, I put out daily shorts for little snackable tips, tricks, and techniques I can share with you. So I always do want to hear from you. This is the best place for me on YouTube to reach out, to comment, ask questions, you name it. Let's chat. I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you on YouTube.